James, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. How you doing, John?
I'm doing good. Asking. So today we're going to be talking about Pay Dirt, the story of Supercross, and as well, I would like to get to know you a little bit more, being the fact that the documentary talks about the sport, how it started, and how different athletes have become legends, including yourself, because of the sport and for the love of the sport. And what interested you to be part of this whole project?
Well, I think when the when it got greenlit, Paul, who was who was the man behind this, I've known Paul for 30 years, and we had been talking that this was in the works, and when it finally was ready to go, he gave me a call and said, "Hey, would you like to come and just talk about your life in the sport, what you did, what you've done afterwards." Obviously, my injury and the foundation that we started afterward is a big part of that story. I kind of jumped at the opportunity because I love the sport. It's been a part of my life since my earliest memory. And so, having the opportunity to tell our story and introduce the sport to more people, it's certainly an honor to do so.
And what got you into the sport? I know that in the documentary, a lot of the beginnings of most of the athletes has been since they were small. They started doing the sport in the amateur league and moving forward. But what is your story? How you got interested to the sport?
Yeah, so my dad had a Honda motorcycle dealership, so I was kind of around motorcycles my whole life, and he took me to a motorcycle race when I was 2 years old, before I could even ride a bicycle, and it was one of the most vivid memories I still have to this day. And I became addicted to motorcycles at a very early age and wanted to ride and started riding and racing when I was very, very young and doing really well at it, and kind of worked my way through the amateur ranks and turned professional when I was 16. And and from really the time I was probably 2 or 3 years old, I rode nearly every single day of my life until I was injured. But yeah, it was kind of my the air that I breathe was being on a motorcycle on a day-to-day basis.
And what is it about this sport that till this day it keeps getting your attention?
I think it's kind of like when you ride a bicycle for the first time, right? As a kid, you get that sense of freedom. And when you ride motocross bikes and you're able to jump jumps and you get that feeling of flying like a bird, you hear kids, "Oh, I wish I could be an eagle or this or that." And so it gives you all these things, it gives you freedom of movement, it gives you freedom to fly. And then when you start to wrap that up in a package of racing, and you start to get those juices flowing of competition, and so it's this total mix of all these different emotions that you're always trying to recreate and to become better at. And I was very addicted to winning, and I liked being the best, and very type A personality type of thing. So in doing in racing, I kind of got to tick a lot of boxes on the things that I really enjoyed, and so it's something that I still love to this day. And I still work with a bunch of kids and help kids out, mentor them, and guide them through the sport, as well as working with our foundation, which we end up helping kids out once they end up getting hurt. Um, so yeah, it's a part of my everyday life, still to this day. 25 years after my retirement.
And question, have you gotten the chance to see the documentary and listen to how it's narrated um by Josh Brolin?
Yeah, it's great. I was able to see it once I was able to see the final edit before the film festival, which was great. Um, was a little bit odd. There's a couple of bits in there actually of my own accident that I'd actually never seen before, and that was the first time I'd actually seen the footage of it. So that was a little bit, got taken aback a little bit. Myself and my son was watching it on my computer when that happened, and we kind of both jumped back a little bit. And so that was interesting to see. But again, that's the thing about this movie. It's I think it can kind of hit a bunch of different aspects of just human nature. And I think it will really resonate with people, whether you're a fan of the sport or a casual fan or a deep fan or someone that's never heard of or seen the sport before that yeah, you want some entertainment. I think it's one of those things that you'll walk away from it very entertained and probably looking to see when a race is coming to your major city to try to see it in person.
Um, and now that you did mention about your accident, and one of the things that caught my attention fully was your words on saying that when you went to like the doctor, you told them you that you just got up and look at me now. And after that, you mentioned in the documentary that you have to keep a positive attitude. You have to keep those positive vibes that the people around you should keep you positive when these things happen. Can you tell me how it felt to say that to the doctor, if you remember? And how was that transition from being somebody that used to ride motocross every day and compete every day to being somebody that now mentors and in the documentary mentions that you used to look for other for more talent for the sport. How was that transition? How did it feel to tell that specialist or that doctor that, hey, what you said is wrong, I'm here now?
Yeah. Well, I think I had a lot of angst and energy in me when I did that. But it was something that spurred me on because, they had told myself and my then girlfriend, now wife, and my family, my parents, that, there was no hope for anything. There's no recovery. You're going to be drinking out of a straw the rest of your life. You have no chance for any recovery. And, you know, to me, be positive about everything because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. I don't think there's any outcome that's ever certain, and nothing lasts forever. So, I did kind of walk back into that hospital and give them a piece of my mind and get that off my chest that, you need to provide motivation for people and not bring them down. It's when you're in a situation, as dire as mine was, that that you need positivity around you and you got to think positive and you got to find a way to get through to the other side. So I just wanted to make sure that doctor knew what my thoughts were and that you always kind of got to push forward in a positive way. And then moving on from there, whether it be through the foundation or through helping these younger kids out, fortunately or unfortunately, I end up with a lot of experience, both good and bad, and how and how this thing can shake things up. So, giving these young kids a good perspective on what the sport can give and take away from you, understanding that you have a very short window of opportunity in this sport to make the most of it, and just enjoy what you're doing because it doesn't last forever. And even being a professional in this sport, you get a 10, 12, 15-year career. That's a long time of a professional athlete, but the reality is it's a very short window in life. And so there's always going to be something that you're going to need to go on and do. But, I try to keep a very positive outlook on what's going on, but at the same time, be aware of the pitfalls that can happen and, do everything you can to mitigate those things from happening to you.
And you just you have mentioned the your foundation a couple of times. Can you tell us what's the foundation called and what is it that the foundation dedicates to?
Yeah, the foundation is called the Road to Recovery Foundation. That's road, the number two, recovery. And what we do is we help out athletes that have catastrophic injuries, whether that's traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, which is what I had. We help them to kind of guide them and navigate them through everything, through the hospital stuff, the billing, insurance, therapies, rehab. There's no real book on how to get through this. It's not like a broken bone where you put it in a cast for 6 weeks and then you're good to go. There is just a bunch of landmines out there, and so we try to help them through it financially. If they're going to need to have their house retrofitted that a wheelchair can get in and out of it, we go in and we do that, help them with a car, or therapies or whatever it ends up being. We're there for them financially and otherwise. So that's what the foundation focuses on. And we're going into our 25th year of the foundation. We've helped out a couple hundred kids so far. We've raised several $1 million, donated that into their therapies or their rehabs or whatever that may be. And yeah, the foundation's been great so far, and it's been a real nice thing to provide the younger generation, which is something I didn't have, but you know, just try to pay it forward as much as possible, really.
Wow, that's really amazing. And James, was there any other moment throughout the documentary that probably you didn't know and was amazed to get to know while watching it?
Well, I want to say that I've always been a kind of student of the sport, and that I knew a lot of the backstories of certainly the riders that came before me. But obviously learning a little bit about the creation of when Supercross became Supercross back in the early 70s, because it started, just right before I was born. So learning a little bit about how those guys came together, created the sport, and got the thing off the ground that I ended up falling in love with. That was, a little bit of an education for me, even knowing as much as I knew about the sport. So, yeah, I think the movie's great, whether you're well educated on the sport or not well educated on the sport. I think there's something in there for everybody.
And wanted to see if you got more insight in regards to there's a section of the documentary that they talk about the privateers that are the independent like motocross or supercross athletes. Do you know more information on how on them? Have you gotten to work with any of these privateers as well?
Yeah, I mean they're the privateers are kind of the unsung hero in the sport. You have the guys that are, in the big factory trucks and making the big money, and for the most part winning all the races. But those guys that are working their butts off and just doing everything they can to get from race to race to prove themselves to the rest of the world, to try to kind of jump up those rungs of the ladder to get to that point where they're one of the guys. you know, it's um it's a really difficult sport. You see these guys week in and week out, and they're working as hard as anybody, man, and potentially sometimes harder, because they're sometimes working on their bikes as well, that they don't have a professional mechanic or whatever it may be. So these guys are working really, really hard. Some of them have some amazing stories of how they've gotten to the point that they've gotten to. And there's no straight line in this. It just, you start here and you end up here, and then you know, it's a squiggly weird line that you gotta run up through to get there. So, the story about those guys, I mean, it really shows that, there's a lot of glitz and glamour, and there's a lot of money that's being made at the very top levels. But then at the lower levels, the guys that are trying to get to that point that haven't been on the fast track to that level, like they're working hard, and their stories are well told. And I think after this movie is released and a lot of people get to see it, I think those guys will end up with a lot more fans. And I think, when people come to the races, they'll kind of search them out a little bit more than maybe they would have beforehand.
Has there been any? I know that in the documentary, I think that one athlete mentions that he was a privateer and he made it to like the big leagues.
Yep.
Has there been any other privateer that had made it to a main event and maybe won it or made it on the top three that has had a chance to work with bigger brands and bigger companies?
There has. I mean, it's very difficult, but yes, there's been a number of guys that have certainly made main events and that race on a week to week basis. And there's been a small handful of guys that have made it to the big show, that have gotten onto the podium, and a couple more of them that have gone to win races. Yes, it's very few and far between, but those unique stories are out there, and it does happen. It certainly isn't on a yearly basis, but over the course of time, over the course of the time that I've been involved in the sport, I've seen a handful of guys that have been able to come from the very bottom and make it all the way to the top. And those guys are legendary. That they didn't have the easy route. They fought the hardest route possible to get there, and they're a part of the sport forever.
Okay. And James, besides motocross, is there any other like sport that you have a fond of?
I mean, I would say I'm a serial fan of a lot of sports. Obviously motorsports, Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, MotoGP racing. I love tennis and golf, and my son's really got me to become a really big fan of basketball and football the last few years because he's a massive fan of those two sports. And so I think I enjoy all sport to be totally honest. I mean, um, I think that there's an interesting thing to make it to the top of any sport, whether that's you're the best ping pong player at the Olympics. I mean, to get to any level, there's so much dedication that you need to get to that point. It doesn't matter what sport it is. I have a lot of respect for someone that can dedicate their life to becoming very elite at something. So I would say I'm pretty much a fan of anything that you can throw a sport around.
And James, other thing that is very popular, and I know that they didn't mention it that much they didn't mention it in the documentary, but at least in my end, being the fact that I have a background in the video game industry, when there's a lot of video games that are based off of Supercross. Were there any chances that you've gotten to work with any of these companies to have a character based off you or any colleague of yours?
Yeah, I actually was in some of the first EA Sports games. And then after I retired, I actually had an opportunity to work with Activision. They were creating a game for Travis Pastrana. And I actually got to consult on the game and help those guys out. So that was a blast. And actually currently we're working with Fortnite. Fortnite's getting ready
Okay.
to create a brand new island that's going to be like an action sports island. And so they're going to put their motocross, supercross, and a version of like a freestyle type of thing in the game. So I've been helping those guys out, kind of consulting on that and helping guide them through that. So that's always cool. And again, always when someone can kind of jump in with you and you're able to reach into your treasure box of knowledge that you've built up over a long period of time, it's always great to be able to help these brands out and give them some knowledge that they wouldn't already have, to make the games better. So yeah, it's been really cool, and the gaming industry is a crazy cool. There's so much energy, and again, even with that, I mean, those guys that are playing these games at the high level, no matter what game it is, I mean, it's still dedication, it's still time, and it's a lot of effort, and you got to be good at what you do. And so yeah, again, that's another sport. I'm a fan of anything that takes a lot of dedication and heart and persistence to get good at it. It just you have to be a different type of person to be able to dedicate your time to something. And so I have a lot of respect for that in people.
If you could give advice to any up and coming um motorsport in this area, in Supercross, that they want to go to that level, what advice will you give them? Because I know that in the documentary you have advice from different coaches, you have advice from different athletes, but what would be your advice for somebody that wants to start or that it's on their journey to try and see if they can make it to the Supercross League?
I think the biggest thing is just believing in yourself, creating a plan and following that plan and not, not getting sidetracked with the noise that you hear. Whether that be good noise or bad noise, because you're going to hear it as you start to do well, people start to chirp, and I you got to be able to kind of work on focusing on what you're working on, and again just staying on the path and not giving up, not quitting. You're not going to you're not going to get to the very top on a really on an easy path. There's always going to be these pitfalls and obstacles that are going to jump in front of you that you got to navigate around, and just, working your butt off to get through that stuff and never say quit.
Amazing. And is there any, like, if you had the chance to have one last drive with somebody that you admire from the sport, who would it be?
For me, I would probably, because he's someone that got paralyzed and he's in a wheelchair now, if I could have one more day on the bike and go ride dirt bikes with David Bailey, that would probably be the one thing I would do. I think we both would enjoy that.
Amazing. And this would be my final question for you today. If you could describe Pay Dirt, the story of Supercross with one word, what would it be?
Breathtaking.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. Yes, it is. Now, James, thank you very much for giving us the time to talk about the documentary and getting to know you a little bit better. Um, and I do hope that everybody that sees this documentary can connect with you, with your story and how you have managed to make it to the top still, and as well whoever is interested in the sport or wants to become a fan of the sport, this documentary can guide them for that.
Absolutely appreciate it, John. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.